This episode of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast is brought to you by MG Schlachter, a built environment and architectural consulting firm with an in-house production team. Delivering support services in the retail, hospitality, and residential sectors for leading brands worldwide, MG Schlachter is reinventing, something near and dear to my heart, of course, architectural support services. So look, let's say you're a worldwide fashion retailer and your new business plan calls for opening 450 new stores around the world this year. Or say you're an architecture firm and in order to grow, you need to staff up quickly to produce detailed drawing packages for your new winning project. Or dig this. Let's say you're a national hospitality brand who's putting together a new line of boutique hotels and you've got to produce a massive amount of graphics, such as custom artwork, posters, or slide decks, both in digital and print. MG Schlachter serves architecture and interior design firms, retailers, construction companies, graphic designers, and brand managers. And with the way they're reinventing architectural support services, they offer production and strategic consulting. Their in-house production team understands the importance of accuracy and precision and can demonstrate the utmost care throughout the drawing and delivery process. And on the consulting side, their team consists of architects and international design consultants with many years of experience in design and construction. Suffice it to say that whatever built environment or architectural project you're working on, MG Schlachter can step in and help accelerate your growth. So, if you're looking for a built environment and architectural services firm with an in-house production team to help you reinvent your next project, check out MG Schlachter. Find them on the web at mgschlachter.com. That's mgschlachter.com, mgschlachter.com. Hey Revolutionaries, I'm excited to bring you this week's episode with Keith Nolan, who's recently taken on the role of general manager of one of the most iconic live music clubs in Bangkok, Thailand, known as Check-In 99. Keith is an amazing musician, keyboard player, singer, music producer, and in this episode, we are all over the map in this episode, I swear, literally, because, Keith grew up in Ireland, and as a young man, he dropped into Australia looking for opportunity and trying to figure out the world a little bit, and that's where he became a full-time musician, really learned his craft. It took him to Vietnam, where he really connected with all these amazing corporations and started doing commercial music for advertising, and now he has been in Bangkok the last few years, killing the scene musically there with his bands, and now managing Check-In 99. Oh, and between all those things, of course, Keith was also able to travel the world as a touring musician. And, I didn't tell him this during the episode, but I am super jealous that, Keith, you got to hang out with Lenny Kravitz and just, at one of your music festivals and just be talking to them and then play softball with all the other musicians that were on tour. Oh, man, what a great experience. Anyways, I know the musicians listening out there are going to love this episode, but also the business folks and the entrepreneur folks and people looking for reinvention are also going to love this because, Keith is really taking care of business along the way. He's really has an entrepreneurial spirit. And if you listen to the end, you're going to hear why learning to juggle can be very powerful in terms of remaining open to reinvention. So one quick note before we get to the episode. I just wanted to let any digital nomaders out there or musicians or friends that may be traveling to Cuba, that I'm going to be there in Pinar del Rio for the Guarapachanga Festival. Hope I said that right. April 17th to 21st, and then I'll be around a couple days in Havana. And I really just wanted to give a shout out to my friends Jackie and Patricia for helping me set this trip up. I'm super pumped to check it out. So if anyone out there wants to connect while I'm there, let me know and we'll get our jam on for sure. All right, well, it's time to get our jam on with Keith, so here is this week's episode.
Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit jimreinventionrevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim.
Hey everybody, hey, this is Jim, and welcome to episode 49 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. And I'm in Bangkok, Thailand today, and we're talking music club management, music production, and the music scene in Bangkok, Thailand with Keith Nolan. So Keith, welcome to the Revolution.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on the show. It's good to be part of the revolution.
Yes, well, you certainly are part of the revolution, and thank you. And first of all, before we dig into things, I wanted to give you another thank you, I guess, for the jam last night.
Oh, that was
so
cool, yeah.
It was really cool, right?
Well, thanks for playing some great saxophone. It was really cool.
It was a lot of fun. So tell people what was going on last night. So your band, which is called what, was playing where?
Yeah, my band Cottonmouth is a blues band. Blues and R&B. We do some other classics like Joe Cocker and Sting occasionally and other cool tunes, but predominantly blues. It's a regular gig. We've played for, I think, 5-6 years now, maybe even longer. It's,
okay. Weekly Wednesday nights.
Weekly Wednesday nights at a bar called Apoteka, or Apoteka in Sukhumvit Soi11, downtown Sukhumvit.
Mm-hmm.
And Wednesday night we've been there for quite a while, and we have a little following and get new people coming through that are visiting Bangkok also.
Right.
And it's really nice when we get, like yourself, some friends and musicians that come back and forth through Thailand, and it's great to catch up and sit in and play some tunes with us.
Yeah,
and,
man,
and it just makes our night,
Well, it made my night for sure, and it makes my trips over here puts a little icing on the cake for my trips over here. It's really great, and it's so fun, and it's really great. Like you said, blues and R&B music, and I think people would be maybe a little bit surprised out there what great kind of music or American influenced music is here in Thailand. So really cool stuff, because that stuff kind of really travels well around the world.
It really does. And interestingly, I have a lot of Thai musician friends, young indie pop rock musicians, that are part of some indie recording labels here and some of the major labels here. But some of the older guys that I've known since I got here were playing for the GIs back in the Vietnam War days.
Okay.
And the GIs would come here, and there was one street, Petcherbury Road. Well, there's many, but that was the main road.
Okay.
And the Thai families kind of quickly figured out that if they opened the front of the house, and they're all like shop houses, 50, 60 in a row, and opened the front and just put some stools and chairs outside, it was now a bar. And the GIs on their R&R time would hang out in these places. So the young Thai kids who were teenagers, 16, 17 years old then, were being given and playing guitar and some, simple tunes.
Right.
The GIs were coming in and giving them records.
Oh, I see. Okay, right.
Whoever was, Chuck Berry and, all these bands and Cream,
right, whatever was starting to bubble up. And
they would
US
take these home and eat it up and learn them, and then they got better. Those musicians are still playing in bands, and they've recorded and written with other artists because they had the influences and they had access to all this stuff when they were young. So Thailand has a huge respect for American music, basically.
Right.
And the king, of course, was a fantastic jazz musician.
Yeah, he was
himself.
a saxophonist.
And he was a saxophone player, yeah.
I couldn't believe it. When I came here in 2016, he was still around. He died recently, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. And I was fascinated because there's all these images of the king around town, and they had a big billboard of him with his alto saxophone. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, I love this. The king is a sax player. Us foreign musicians and a lot of the jazz musicians around town, he's written a huge amount of work, albums and released a lot of stuff. So he was big into music. Yeah, I went and researched, and actually there's still some YouTube videos online of him playing some of his own original music and him playing. So
and he would invite people, like the Preservation Hall, and bands he liked from the States and swing bands. He would invite them to the Palace, and they would jam till all hours of the morning.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun.
And there's footage of that too, and the photos, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, one of the many reasons I like Thailand. Keep coming back. It seems like the culture or the people, they're open to music. They like saxophone, and I guess they like the king.
In the rest of the world, where venues are going out of business because real estate is so expensive and labor is so expensive, and there's all these liabilities.
Sure,
people can rarely afford to even have live music anymore. So it's cheaper to have, canned music or DJs, and maybe the younger generation are not so interested. The older generation that would go grew up going to live music and buying live music and
Right.
experiencing live music, now don't go out as much or
Yeah.
have family obligations or work obligations.
Yeah, so true.
So it's kind of different now. But Bangkok, in retrospect, actually has a huge live music scene.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good, and I'm glad you mentioned this because this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Was recently you became the general manager of one of the, I think big iconic music-oriented clubs in Bangkok called Check-In 99.
That's right. Yeah.
And so tell me how you feel about that, and how did this evolve? Because this is like a reinvention for you. Like when I first met you,
Yeah.
I think you were really a gigging musician. Clearly, everybody knows you. You're a great resource around town, and you do music production, which we'll talk about in a second too. But I didn't see you becoming the general manager of this place, and now you are. So tell me what
Yeah, I
happened.
kind of didn't see it myself. But,
Right.
well, first of all, Check-In 99 is a place I used to play. And I occasionally, once or twice a year, I would put a Blues Brothers tribute, a 16-piece Blues Brothers tribute band together.
Okay.
And we would play at Check-In 99 because it was just one of those old, nostalgic, established
Right.
live music
How many
venues.
years has it been around? It's
Actually, it started in 1957.
okay.
Again, before the war and stuff like that.
Right,
it was
right.
around, and it was under the name Coca Cabana or something.
Gotcha.
And American dignitaries and some movie stars would, and of course,
A storied club, like
yeah.
a place everybody kind of knew was hip and
Yeah.
fun, maybe a little bit underground or after hours kind of feel to it.
Exactly. And Bangkok, coffee clubs and Starbucks and hip restaurants. They weren't here 20 years ago, not even 15 years ago. I remember
Okay.
the first coffee shop where you go and hang out and, lounge about in a coffee shop. It was next to the Hard Rock Cafe
Right.
in Siam. The Hard Rock Cafe was here quite a long time. But outside that, there really wasn't anything else. These places would just sprout up. Anyway, Check-In 99, it relocated from Zealand to Sukhumvit, kept the name from its original address, and just moved to Sukhumvit, which
Okay.
had been there till a year ago, for just under 30 years.
Okay. Wow.
So it was very well established amongst all the foreigners and people visiting Thailand. And they would have people like Robin Williams, lots of famous musicians. Sammy Hagar has popped in, Jerry Brown, Stevie Wonder's drummer, and
Right.
B.B. King's Hammond organist. And
Yeah, it's the musicians kind of hang
Yeah.
place. Everybody kind of knows about it when you're
Yeah.
on tour. That's where you go after hours, hang out. It's fun, And
And
the
the
crowd
place-
is into the music.
That's right, and the place itself wasn't flash. It was a lounge basically with a house band, 7 nights a week. But other events would happen, and then it became really cool.
Right.
And about a decade ago or so, I started a Sunday afternoon jazz session, and the owners are very good friends of mine, and that's how I sort of got involved with them.
I see.
And we were looking to do new things there, and they really dug doing events and live music performances, theatre shows, anything like that.
Right.
So I started doing a Sunday afternoon jazz session. It's still running to this day, even though we've moved location twice since the old one closed.
Right.
And we've tried to retain the old Check-In 99. So that's kind of how it came about. And then more recently, 8 months ago, the house band left. That had been with them for something like 16 years.
Oh,
so
wow,
when
okay.
they got a gig in the Caribbean somewhere. So when they left, the owners called me and said, the house band has left and we really need some new music. So we need some new bands, and what do you
Right.
think? Can we talk? So I had a meeting with them, and they said, look, we're all really busy. We'd like to offer you a job. Would you take it on? And I didn't want to see the place close or fail.
Yeah.
So
Right.
whilst I was quite busy, I'm doing a lot of production stuff, a lot of composing stuff, licensing stuff. I've got into over the last few years, just as a musician, working for myself, trying to get into a new digital world, online space.
Right. Sure.
I was quite busy, but I said yes, and I'm happy I did that because I've
Okay.
got some great music going on there now. It's finally done a turnaround. So
you're at this crossroads in a way. I kind of want to explore this a little bit, because it's like, it's not something you saw coming necessarily, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I don't want this to fall into someone's hands who maybe wouldn't take care of it or curate it the right way, or go out of business because no one really is going to step up and do it.
That's right. That's right. And then the staff, and the people that have been working there a long time would have been out of a job, and they're like family.
Right, exactly. And so everybody kind of knows each other. So that's cool that you step in and do it. But what was did you have kind of like a background or notion how to manage a club? Even though you've worked in clubs, it's different if you're managing employees and food operations and the alcohol operations, and
I mean the really,
marketing part,
the day-to-day operation side is there's a lot to do.
Right.
There's there's just, it never stops. The managing people side, that's a people's skill, and I think as musicians we tend to, most musicians anyway, do that pretty well. They're mainly sociable, and they live in the nighttime.
Right.
So that kind of, that's something that needs, you need to be able to do, but it comes a little bit more natural to us. When I had been from Ireland, I'd moved to Australia and toured for a long time, and I moved to Asia. I moved to Vietnam in '94.
Okay.
And while I was working there, I needed work, and I was playing a couple of gigs, but I was offered a job managing a jazz club called Buffalo Blues, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I needed a job.
In Vietnam?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was in Saigon for 6 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so you did have some kind of view into this world. You weren't just going in totally blind.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
so I did that for about a year or two until they closed it, which was great because it set me up with all the contacts and relationship with musicians in around town in Saigon, and I met some incredible people. I had dinner with Robert De Niro there. Walked in one night and loved jazz, and I'm kind of at the bar and I'm looking at this guy. I'm thinking, holy,
seems familiar. This guy looks
holy
familiar.
moly, that looks like, I think I know this guy. Who's this guy? And we got on great. And the following evening we went out to dinner. And I was just talking to him about, mainly not even movies, really, about cars, about Ireland, about music. And he was a huge guy into jazz. So kind of nice things like that happen, particularly when you travel and when you live in a country that's not your own country. You're constantly experiencing something and learning something. So I had a stint learning, and in most of these places the staff do pretty much everything. They know what they're doing, but you have to manage marketing, you have to manage customers, you have to manage suppliers, repairs. There's all sorts of stuff that goes on a daily basis. Even now it's much more harder now, because you have to work harder, you have to do more to bring money in and business in, because things are more expensive. There's much more competition. There's more people in the digital marketing space, which used to be print media. Now it's social media, and you need photography, and you need video, and you need, there's so much more you need. Whereas a decade or two ago, people would just search places out. And there wasn't
print up flyers or something. It wasn't as intense. 24/7 kind of. You have to be posting and getting content out there, right? And it's very different today. So that was my first experience having to run a club, and I just took it on and learned something from it. Okay, so it's about 8 months later, you would say, now that you've been doing the job, and what's it look like now? You got it under your belt, clearly, because I've been there since I came back to town here this time. Everything looks great over there. You've made some subtle changes, kind of improving I think the quality of the experience, or the feel of the place feels more substantial in a way. And the presentation of the band, etc.
Simple things. The room was quite long, so you're looking at the floor space of 15, maybe 20 meters long. So it's the band was quite far away. So when people walk in to the bar area, then you go into the main stage area. So if you imagine a rectangular box with the stage down the back, it was so big and cavernous and high ceilings, people weren't staying very long, and and I couldn't figure out what was going on.
I see.
So I researched some clubs and looked at some clubs, and one thing I found at a lot of really cool and older places that had managed to stay in business had a few things in common. One is the room was smaller; they were intimate. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, if I bring my stage forward, I don't need all that space because I don't have the customers anyway.
Right.
And it would be a nice complaint to have if I get too busy, I can move the stage back.
Sure. Yeah,
you know.
Right.
So I kind of figured I wasn't losing anything. So I brought the stage forward, and that was okay for a while. But it still looked big and cavernous. Mm-hmm. So I had a projector, and I was projecting old videos of live jazz and blues and stuff like that on the back wall. Now that was okay for a while. Mm-hmm. And then I had the brainwave to put in big old crushed velvet curtains right behind basically the back of the stage that I'd brought forward.
Yeah, I noticed. I thought those were new.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's
and
really cool.
That did two things. One, it made the room sound better.
Yeah, it's great for sound, for sure.
That, you know,
and visually,
So the sound is improved 200% now, just because of that. It's also created this really plush environment. So when people actually spend money, they feel they're getting value for money.
Right.
Because they're in a nice place. And they see the curtains, they see instruments on stage, and now the experience is better.
Right.
And when the bill arrives, they're literally happy to pay it. But psychologically, people don't really understand this. When you go to a venue and there's not much in there, you don't feel
you're like,
getting
why
value.
Is it so expensive?
Yeah, and it might be less expensive than some other places,
right?
But they're not getting the customer value experience.
Value.
So I learned some things from that, and it's really working. And finally, it's taken 6 or 7 months, but it's done a turnaround. And with the help of social media and SEO through Google Business and Google stuff, we're very high. You know, if you search live music in Bangkok, live entertainment Bangkok, we were very, very high, if not at the top.
Now, this is a good point you bring up here, because for Check-In 99, for example, especially being in Bangkok, Bangkok's a very tourist-oriented city. In a way, it's like very open for tourists, right? It's a big megalopolis here in Southeast Asia, that it's really a key thing when all these people are dropping into town, and the next night they want to go out and see some live music. So search online is huge for finding a business like yours, right?
Yep.
So how did you know obviously that's important, but did you know the ins and outs or the nuts and bolts of how to tweak things or get the website title right, or how it should get integrated or indexed for Google and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we had help with that, but we enlisted a company, two really good guys that build websites. They understand that world very well, and these things they're really connected.
Yeah.
And not only do you need a website, but before you build a website, you need to know what its functions are going to be, so you build in the right components.
Yeah, you have to have the integrated vision kind of beforehand, right?
So with a live music venue, with Check-In 99, we needed to find new customers, and we actually have 3 target markets. You have your tourists that are coming in.
Right.
You have expats that are living here and like to go out, and that's your bread and butter. That's your weekly money. And then you have the people that are doing business that are coming in and out of Thailand regularly.
Okay, right.
And you need to build a reputation to for the services you're providing, live music and international and Thai food menu.
I see. Right.
So you need to be able to get the message out that you're providing these services, and like-minded people that are interested in a good meal in a nice place, comfortable, safe environment, easy to get to, good location,
right,
and great live music 7 nights a week. Bang! That's what you're selling. That's what you're trying to buy.
Right.
And now the challenge is to reach those different demographics. And one is all the expats and business people that are living there. Not only are they in business, but they often quite have networking nights. So you have a corporate side that you can bring into your venue as well. They might have meetups.
Right.
So I have several, like a transport company. I have a financial company. We have a couple of other companies and a couple of embassies, chambers of commerce, that might book your bar area between 6 and 8:30 once a month or twice a month.
Right.
So that's another business angle. Then there's solely the tourists that come in at different times of the year. You have the Europeans come in a couple of months, and certain times of the year.
Right.
And then you have the Asian community that are coming in from
other parts of Asia. Yeah, right, exactly.
China,
China,
Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea and Japan, and they'll come in when they have their holidays.
Right.
And so it's just a matter of being, in front of those people when they are searching.
Figuring out all those distinct kind of markets or channels and speaking to them, hey,
exactly.
You're welcome here. We'll figure it out. We'll make you feel comfortable. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, really neat. Well, you know what? Let's rewind a little bit for a second here, because as you were talking about your background, how you're originally from Ireland and you moved around a little bit, and it remind me of a story or memory. Excuse me. That when I first started traveling, so I first started kind of trying to get out of my comfort zone and maybe reinvent things for myself a little bit. Back in 2016, I found Check-in 99 at the previous place it's been, or maybe two previous places ago. I'm not sure where it was. Right on Sukhumvit, I think it was.
Yeah, that's
And you were one of the first folks I ran into. We were talking, and I could not place your accent as you were talking to me. And I'm like, you look like an average kind of, white guy, maybe European, maybe Australian, maybe whatever. I'm not sure. And I kept listening to it. I'm like, my ear's not that bad. I mean, I play music. I try to listen to people. And I thought it was Australian. Then I thought maybe, no, it's not quite Australian. It's something else. And it's this real dual mix, I think, of Irish and Australian, like mixed together.
Yeah.
And that kind of blew my mind kind of like wide open, because, you were like this real fixture here in Bangkok. And you have this mixed accent because you live in these different places. So it kind of was fascinating to me to hear your story about how you grew up in Ireland and what got you moving and where have you been. So tell me a little bit about the genesis, I guess, of Keith Nolan, the man here, for a second. How you moved around, because I think it's instructive for people to, be open to change if you think you need it, or for opportunity or whatever. And excuse me, hold on a second. My throat here. One of the challenges of Bangkok is sometimes the air quality. I think it's got my throat a little bit closed up today. But okay, so that's what I wanted to ask you about. So tell me what happened.
Well, I'm from Dublin in Ireland. When I'm an electrician by trade, I have electronics degrees. I loved electronics, keyboards, and all that sort of stuff. So I became an electrician, and then I further studied electronics. And in Dublin at that time, that was in the 80s. By the time I turned 21, it was 1987. And I've never wanted to be anything else. I loved electronics, but I wanted to be a musician. And I've played piano, keyboards. Piano since I'm 5, and keyboards since I was 13, 14, when I started playing with bands and, being into music. So I kind of knew, looking around my environment where I grew up in, which was quite a rough area in Dublin on the north side, a place called Finglas. And, sometimes in the evening times, the buses wouldn't even go through there after 6 o'clock in the evening. Yeah, it was kind of like, I've never been to the Bronx, but I imagine it might be kind of like that. And
those parts of town.
Those parts of town. And in fact, you couldn't even get a job if your address had that on it, if you were from this area, because they'd go, roughhead, all the people, and they just wouldn't take a chance.
They don't want any trouble, right?
When I started my apprenticeship, I actually had to change my address to my aunt, who lived in a nicer area. Wow. And but anyway, I could see through those years that the people in my environment that had grown up were already, say, in the future, in the 30s and 40s. There was unemployment. There was all these gangs, there was all this stuff going on. I thought, I didn't sign up for this. This is not what I want.
Doesn't look like a great future coming.
Yeah. and I thought, how am I going to... So at a very early age, I really started my apprenticeship, even then, knowing I needed a way out. Where and why, I had no idea, because I really didn't understand yet. But I knew if I was going to do anything, you needed. And years later, I knew if you were going to get into America, Canada, or another country in Europe or Australia, you needed to be qualified. You needed a degree, or you needed a trade.
Yep.
And my area is all working class and stuff like that. So trade was, one of the best options. And I liked electronics anyway. So, So I finished that in 86, 87, and I had quite a few keyboards. I had built up, saved my money and been in bands, and I sold everything, basically bought a ticket to Australia. And that was the reason, and I kind of figured...
So you sold your keyboards? Is that
sold
what you
everything.
said? All your gear?
For a ticket, yeah.
And you're like, I'm out.
I'm out. I'm done.
Wow.
And it was just like to...
Was there like a straw that broke the camel's back, like a bad day at work, or you just had gotten your degree, your certification or whatever, and thought it's time to move, or
no?
what?
Looking back, it was kind of something I wanted from a very young age.
Wow, okay,
cool. I don't know why.
Right.
I've never really understood why I'm built like that.
Right.
I've always had that ambition,
Yeah,
and I kind of figured home is somewhere you can always go back to.
Sure.
But I want to live first.
Right.
And none of my family or close relations had kind of done that, and I kind of felt I was at my own.
Right.
Gypsy blood in my, maybe it's the gypsy blood in me, I don't know. and I went to Australia really only because I had a friend there that I could hook up with and put me up for a couple of weeks till I got on my feet. So I was very nervous. I was 21. Yeah. I had no idea what the future was. I was terrified of going through customs and arriving in another country alone.
Right, yeah.
And,
scary thing at that point. Had you traveled much before that at all?
No, I hadn't traveled at all.
Yeah,
I'd never been overseas.
Yeah, I remember my first trip overseas to Europe. I was like really sweating bullets, thinking like, what am I doing? I went by myself.
Yeah.
Am I going to be able to deal with the language barrier, customs, the whole thing?
Yeah. And so I saved my money. I sold whatever I had. I got enough money to leave. I kind of figured, okay, I'll do a year. And if I don't like it, I can come home. At least I've been somewhere. And
sure.
I won't have missed out on anything at home, that's for sure.
Right.
So I got to Australia. I was there for a few weeks. I loved it. The weather was fantastic. The people were great. It was outdoors, compared to Ireland, which is gloomy, wet, rainy and cold most of the time.
Yeah.
Summers in Ireland were pretty much always on a Tuesday.
A Tuesday.
Something like that. So
anyway, every other week.
Every other week or every other year. And so anyway, my new life was great, and I was having a great time. And then I sought out a blues gem, and I got myself. I had a job by this time. I got a job, started saving money, and I went out and bought a Fender Rhodes, Stage Rhodes 88.
Oh, sweet!
And I was renting an apartment, and I was earning more money than I'd ever seen in Ireland, and I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Right.
Eventually I bought a car, and then I was going to this blues jam with a guy called Dutch Tillers. Fantastic. He was kind of the godfather of blues in Melbourne at that time.
Okay.
Melbourne is where I went to.
I see.
And the young musicians that were playing with him and some of the older musicians. So I learned a lot, and I got into the blues scene. And then I got a couple of gigs with some other bands, and I was playing with a lot of bands and earning money, and I was working in the daytime. And I did that for a few years until I quit working in the daytime and became a professional musician and worked my way up through some bands, some recordings, and kind of got established in the Melbourne scene and some original bands. And it was a great time for a young man from Ireland, living in another country.
Yeah, that's cool.
Had
exciting.
Independence and money and equipment and a car.
Right. Having it work out for you is exciting.
Yeah.
Like, even though you have those great experiences, I think it's a lot of confidence building to be able to drop in and figure it out for yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, it does. It makes you feel really good and confident, and that can breathe more confidence.
Yeah,
it breeds
absolutely.
Success because you're connected to people. You're doing stuff, and then you get to a point where people are kind of relying on you because you've made a small name for yourself, and you're getting gigs, so people want to work with you.
Yeah,
and it all feeds into the same synergy, really, and there's casualties of that too. There's good experience and bad, but generally, if you learn from something, then it's a good experience.
Right,
even when you've
that's true.
had your
you got to go through the fire to get to where you're going,
And then you learn a lot about the business. You learn a lot about the music industry that you're in.
Right.
And that was interesting, and that became my new profession, basically.
I see. So that's where you became full time playing music is in Australia.
Well, I'd been touring Ireland for 2 or 3 years, up and down Ireland with bands before to earn money.
That. I see.
Yeah. After I finished my apprenticeship and stuff like that, I was touring with some club bands and stuff like that, touring Ireland. So I did that for
Gotcha.
quite a while before I left as well. So yeah.
I see. Yeah. So you're in Australia for a while, and
Yeah.
what's the impetus to stay? I guess maybe out here in Southeast Asia, but move on to to Thailand and Vietnam and these other places.
Yeah. It was a synergy thing. It was an accident, and I just went with it, basically. I'd been touring and playing in Australia at this point, 9 years, I think, up and down Australia. I was playing with established bands, and, things were good. But I'd done it to death. I'd done it so many times now. So I'd gone from a young boy arriving in Australia, and now it was kind of like, oh, I've done that 10 years later, And I was playing
Time for a new challenge, maybe.
Yeah, and I had been jamming with, in a blues band, the ex-guitar player from Procol Harum. Okay. And he said to me one night, he called, or we were at a gig, and he said, hey, you fancy going to play in Vietnam? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. He goes, we've got to put a band together to play for Australia Day to the Australian expat community in Vietnam. I'm like, absolutely, cool. Awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah. Sounds great.
And here we are. So we rehearsed up a band, and we went and played this, big festival, in Ho Chi Minh City, in Saigon at that time, to 3,500, 4,000 expats in an outdoor gig. It was awesome, and I met some great people. And I'd never been to Asia, and Vietnam was a trip. Yeah. It was manic. The people were awesome. The city was just out of control.
Right.
And the architecture is fantastic. And I just immediately felt, I love this place. I've just felt at home. And I was alive again. I just, wow. And
so that was the first time you'd seen a place really like that, right? Because you hadn't seen that kind of lifestyle, I guess, in Europe, right?
Yeah.
Or in Australia beforehand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it shook me to my core. I just thought, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And I had a great experience. So I went back to Melbourne, and I'd been there at home, my new home in Melbourne for a few months. And I thought, and I stayed in touch with some people from Vietnam. So I thought, I might go and live in Vietnam for a while. So again, I thought I'd just do 6 months. Right. Whatever, and see how I was,
see how I like it,
see how I get along. But I think deep down, I really wanted to write music for TV commercials and documentaries and movies, and I hadn't got there yet. I could write, and I've always been able to write a song or be creative and compose. But I hadn't learned any engineering skills. I'd been in studios and recorded, and I didn't have any equipment. And if you wrote a song and had an idea, you would have to go and spend a fortune in some studio somewhere just to get that idea out, and when I got to Vietnam, apart from running the jazz club for a while, a job I was offered, I put a small band together and I started doing music. I met all the guys that were in ad agencies, and they said, hey, you're a musician, could you write a song similar to this? We like this song, but we can't use it, but we need something. I said, yeah, I can do that. So they would pay for the studio time, and I'd work with Vietnamese, so I learned how to speak Vietnamese, and worked with some Vietnamese studios. And then we'd start composing stuff. And then next thing I'd done, a TV commercial for some major household brand name, and I was like, wow, this is so cool, And then a little Vietnamese local band that I was playing 3 or 4 nights a week. And there was a couple of other expats that played music in Saigon. Right. But there was no real scene or bands. You had to create your own scene. So we'd find a bar that didn't have music, that expats went to, that we all loved to hang out in, and then one night a week we'd bring equipment in and we'd play for them.
Right.
And it became a live music venue.
See if it worked, yeah.
And that's how, in the early 90s, 94 on in Ho Chi Minh City, there was no live music venues. There was a couple of hotels that had cha-cha bands and hostesses and all that. It was quite
just culturally different, kind of very isolated maybe.
And
to that
don't
point.
forget, back then there was a lot of music from the States, from the Vietnam War after 75. It was banned.
Right.
So, we quite often have the army turn up and raid the bar we were playing in because we didn't have a license to
Even
play foreign music in English.
Yeah,
and they would say it's not fit for the consumption of the local...
Of a proper Vietnamese person or whatever,
Yeah. So, it was quite culturally different, and... of course, we broke all the rules back then because we were expats living in Ho Chi Minh City, and we had to create events and create things for ourselves.
Now, did you think that was an advantage being an expat in terms of kind of breaking into the advertising part and working with those clients because you spoke English, maybe because you had these more Western style business skills or something, like a kind of approach, the way to interact with people?
Not
What
really.
do you think
really, the thing then was having access to those people.
I see.
In another country, you'd never have a meeting with the creative director of Bates Advertising or J. Walter Thompson or, Chusenko or any of these big advertising agencies.
Right.
They just wouldn't. You wouldn't get in the door unless you were an already established recording studio and you knew the agency. So, but in Vietnam, you'd go into the bar and you'd be sitting having a chat with the head of Pepsi or the head of Coca-Cola or the head of Bates Advertising or the head of everybody drank in the same places and talked and everybody got along well. These guys would come to see me play music.
Right.
So there was a relationship there.
So that community kind of really...
It was a community sense. We were all at the same place at the same time and there was not many other guys there.
Right.
Other than myself. And
Well, you were unique because you're an expat, plus you're a musician and have those skills. So it's a little bit different.
They had to produce stuff locally, and they had to use whatever resources they could find locally to get things done. Same with business cards. You had to find a Vietnamese printing company that understood what you wanted and have the equipment to actually get your business cards printed. And, very simple things. Housewives needed things for their children and for their nursery, for their things, and things didn't exist. So people would start a business or invest in something and make it happen somehow.
Right.
So they were the cool things about it.
Yeah, what an interesting time.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So
I learned a lot.
Yeah, a ton, sounds like.
Having to fend for yourself, basically.
Right. Okay, so you get into that scene and you're in Vietnam for a while. What's the impetus to bring you to Bangkok?
Well, I'd been from while I was in Vietnam, and I'd worked for myself from 94 basically till 99. Mm-hmm. During that time, around 98, 99, I was offered a gig playing keyboards with an Australian band. Some other guys had come through that I worked with, and when they went back, they recommended me. And it turned out to be one of the biggest bands in Australia called Yothu Yindi, an Aboriginal band, world music band, very well established, toured the world, and a big name and great band in Australia. And I was lucky enough that they were coming to Asia and needed a keyboard player, and I got that gig. So I did Vietnam and Malaysia and Singapore and Bangkok and stuff with them. Right. And they were venturing out on a world tour a few months after that, come summer. Mm-hmm. So I got on really well with them, and they offered me a world tour.
Oh, nice.
So I ended up in 99 going on a world tour for most of 99 with them. And the highlight of that was playing Glastonbury in 99, to like 80,000 people or something. And now all of a sudden I'm hanging with Lenny Kravitz backstage and Al Green and the REM. And, and we're all in the same space. We're all sitting
in Glastonbury.
Yeah, hanging backstage.
It's got to be like mind-blowing for you, right? Like,
and we actually had a football team, and on our side we had REM, half of Blondie's team. Our guys from Yothu Yindi, and on the other side there was, Joe Strummer, and there was all these other band members from all these super famous bands, like Hole were there.
Just like the local company softball game, whatever.
Yeah. and you just... it was in the middle, literally backstage, between where we parked all our tour buses. Yeah. And I'm just looking at this going, holy shit, how did this happen? And I was sitting talking to Lenny Kravitz for about 30 minutes, and we were just talking about Ireland, and he had a great range of keyboards, so I went and had a look at his keyboards, and we were hanging out, and we became quite good friends during this short time, and we were sitting there, and Al Green walked in, and I looked at Lenny, and Lenny looked at me, and we both had that moment of, holy shit, are you seeing what is that what I think it is? And we were looking at each other, and I thought, you can't buy that.
No.
If you've lived life and something like that happens to you, everything, you just know in that moment, everything was worth it.
Yes, absolutely. And all the sacrifices and fear and leaving and
all
whatever.
All the fear, all the leaving home, all the regrets, all the everything, you just
other
go,
experiences
it
you
doesn't
missed out
get
on
any
or
better
whatever,
than this.
yeah.
And years later, I met up with the guitar player from REM. I ended up he was coming to Vietnam and called me. He said, hey, you want to come and play with me in Ho Chi Minh? Where are you? I said, I'm in Bangkok. And he said, can you come over here? And I'm like, yeah.
Right.
And then stuff like that happens,
Amazing.
And Bangkok's like that as well. There's so many people that come through.
Yeah.
And you just meet at a bar. If the bar is kind of a place where people come to, like Check-in 99 has that synergy.
Right.
So people come there, you meet people, like
Exactly.
when I met you.
Yeah.
And now we're friends after all these years. And you have relationships here and friendships here, and you can come around anywhere in Bangkok and just get up and play with, and you are welcome to play with your friends and bands relationships you have made. It's the same kind of thing.
It's really, really fun and interesting. And and it's totally true that, I see all these different people coming through Check-in 99, like you mentioned. It is that kind of place that just, like, what was that band? This is a few weeks ago now. That happened to be in town. It was a Japanese pop band.
That's right. Called Ricky and FSP.
That's right, Ricky and FSP.
They're fantastic.
They were fantastic, right? And
10-piece band.
I happened to be there that night. Yeah, 10-piece band, 2 dancers out front, full rhythm section, keys, and Ricky's a saxophone player, leader of the band, and sings. And when we got up and jammed all together later that night, right?
Yeah.
When you were playing, it was just a fun night, and
they were so nice. And they again, they're quite well known in Tokyo,
right?
And they have albums, and they were coming through Bangkok, and I had met their promoter, and the promoter happened upon Check-in 99 because he heard it was jazz,
right?
And he spoke to me and said he had bands coming through. Would we be able to talk about putting them on? And I said, yeah, I'd love to, because I love doing things like that.
Right,
and they were super, super nice. So yeah, and basically by '99, when I finished my world tour with Yothu Yindi, we did Europe and Asia and all sorts of places. And when I came back to Vietnam in '99, I decided I think I'll try Bangkok. I'd done everything in Vietnam I kind of needed to do.
Right.
And I continue to go back there. I still play there, and I still go and visit my friends. all those years later. And I still love that city very much. But I moved to Bangkok, yet again another challenge, and to grow and try to evolve.
Right.
This time, I kind of knew a few people here already from the advertising world, from coming over doing post-production jobs. And I put a little band together, and then I opened a recording studio, basically. And I was playing music and recording, and that became my new...
Your new thing.
My new thing and home, yeah.
Your latest reinvention. I
guess,
right? Let's talk about that a little bit, because I know I see you produce from time to time different types of tracks, and I'm curious about kind of all the different styles that you're producing, like out of your studio. I guess, obviously you can record other bands and those kind of things, but I've seen you produce tracks, let's say for like the spa environment, or like relaxation or meditation, those kind of things, which seems to fit one of the big niches here in Thailand, which is, the massage and spa scene, right?
Yeah.
How'd you get into that, or what's your focus of the studio these days?
When I opened the recording studio, my Thai business partner was a good friend, a lady who was in the hotel business, and she became our Thai. When you have a business in Thailand, you must have a 51% Thai ownership.
Right. Okay.
And the foreigners are 49. And she was a good friend, and she had her own businesses, including boutique hotels. And I opened a recording studio, and she asked me during that time. She became our business partner, and she had call it Alinta, a very beautiful, chic, hip boutique resort. And she said, "Hey, I'd love to have my own album."
To go along with the resort.
So that's how it started.
That's a great idea.
And we had some, there's Cafe Del Mar and Buddha Bar and all these kind of things were very popular at the time. And I said, I'll create you your own chill out album.
Yeah.
I'll write some original songs, which was awesome, because I wanted to learn. I now had a studio, and I was learning to be an engineer and producer.
Okay.
Gone from musician to actually being able to think of an idea, create the idea, record the idea, bounce it down into a WAV file, an MP3, and then put it on a CD. Right. It's different today,
right?
The
process
vehicle of putting it out, but the principles are the same. So you create an idea, you sit down, and we had a roadmap to work to. We had reference tracks, we had stuff that she liked. So
I see.
So I went about recording her an album. And that album she still sells to this day. And she has it in her car. When people arrive from the airport, it's the first experience. So she knew, and I learned a lot from her as well, because she understood branding. She understood how to have a brand and psychologically connect people to the brand by playing your own branded music.
Right,
so when people go home, they could literally take you home with them by buying the CD, and you could re-experience that back in wherever you were from.
Right,
back in the
takes you
States.
right back to where you were. Yeah.
Back in Europe, you could put a candle on and lie in a bubble bath and put the album on, and you think, oh my God, I'm back at Alinta in Thailand or whatever. So that was the first kind of hotel album I did, and then she wanted a second one, and then she opened a spa. So I said, I really want to do a spa album for you.
Okay.
And for me as a composer and musician, as a keyboard player, I've always been interested in the synthesizers and sampling and all that sort of stuff. So,
right.
And now with having Logic and having VST instruments, you can download these amazing sounds and sound design and all sorts of stuff. So I could literally sit at a keyboard and just compose to my heart's content. And now I could actually engineer it and produce it. Mm-hmm. And over the years, it takes a few years, but over the years, things start to sound better.
Right.
I'm not sure if I went back to the first albums I did that they sounded great, but
right, yeah.
but it was okay,
right,
and definitely much better today. So again, trying to evolve, trying to survive. This is the other thing. I think as a musician, we spend most of our lives surviving. You live in survival mode.
You said a mouthful right there.
Yeah, you don't know where your next rent is coming from, and you can be really positive and you can have a great attitude. But creativity is good, but it needs to find you working at work.
Right.
If you're not at work and you're not walking forward, nothing's going to meet you halfway.
Right.
You need to be moving. You need to be on YouTube learning a new skill. If you've run out of work, you need to learn some marketing. You need to teach yourself something. Be a better piano player. If you might want to play jazz in a hotel, or you might want to be a better blues player, or you might need to learn classical if you want to better yourself. But so long as you're going forward and trying to do something, even in a small way, once a week even, to challenge yourself to, okay, I'm going to try to do something, then I think your mind is that portal stays open.
Right. Oh,
even if a little bit.
Well, the market's always changing. First of all, just the dynamics of humans and culture and behavior, and then you throw the technology layer on top of it, and it's like, wow, you really got to pay attention
that's
to
difficult
these things.
Because from our influences, from when I started out to the space we're in today, and a lot of it we're grappling to understand, especially if you talk about the music industry and digital marketing and old traditional ways, and now albums and LPs, now CDs and DVDs, and now it's downloads. Right. It's upside down.
Right.
It's streaming. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
it's very, very different. So, in regards to that, we've got a few minutes left here, but there's always a few key questions I like to ask people when they come on the show, and one of them relates to this, and it's about the technology layer, basically.
Yep.
Is there something you see out there? You talked about, keeping your mind open and being open to change, but is there something that really gives you pause, or is a real big challenge for you to keep learning, or something about technology? Like what's really getting at you, or do you see, or what real advantage do you see now that's evolving with the technologies?
Well, okay. Well, first of all, it's a challenge because there's so much happening, and it's happening faster.
Yeah, faster and faster every day.
And we don't understand it all. And I certainly don't, as much as I'd like to think I know about the music industry and how it all worked.
Right.
It doesn't work that way anymore.
No.
And it's the young millennials that are going to be the key of finding what it is and where we're at in the future, just by creating a new space, because that's what they want.
Right.
And how those things have changed. Like people don't want to pay for stuff anymore because it's a different value system. They don't value things the way we valued earning your money at a day job or playing a gig and then going to the shop and buying an album, putting it on a shelf, and you say, I own those albums. I've got 200 albums.
Right.
I bought those. I paid for them. They're mine.
Right. So there was a scarcity back then because of the production and how much it cost to produce them. Now that it's all gone into software, there's no cost of production anymore to create
right.
a million copies. So it is a different equation. And it's we'll see how it gets monetized or how the value gets transferred in the future here. But that's kind of what it is right now.
Yeah, and for me, I'm happy to learn new things. It is and can be a challenge and frustrating. But a couple of years ago, when I started these designer albums and spa albums, I now have over 20, 30 hours of different styles, 14 genres of spa music, wellness music, and I have 2 music streaming sites now. One for hotels, boutique hotels with chill out music, relaxing piano, jazz, this and that, and I've created all these 2.5 hours of this, 2.5 hours of that, 2.5 hours of that, 6 hours of this, reception area music. And I just spent 2 years making all that music, knowing that in the future, I would create residual income by having that out on a space. And now there's places like CD Baby and Bandcamp, Disco Kid or whatever they're called, TuneCore, where you can literally write a song, create a song, record a song, and upload it immediately with some artwork. And you can do the artwork yourself if you learn how to do all that, and place it on these websites.
Right.
So if somebody says, "Hey Keith, where can I buy your music?" You say, go to CD Baby and search, Keith Nolan or whatever. But if you pay a little bit extra, they will send it out and put it on iTunes, Amazon Music,
all the
Google,
big distribution centers,
Spotify and everything else. So, and that's really where you need to be, and you need to have a lot of music out there. And if you have music out there, at least you're in the running to be. Somebody might hear your track one day, and the more they listen to it, obviously you get some money. Streaming doesn't pay much, but somebody might want it for a TV commercial or a documentary, and then they pay sync rights.
Right.
Or somebody that's making a TV commercial, here's your production and here's your song, say, look, this is great. You don't have anything I want, but I'll definitely work with you to compose me something I want.
Right.
So
more of a commission kind of style work, Yeah, no, I think you're right that having that, when people think of music, I think a lot of people think of solely pop music in a way, or the pop music business in a way.
Yeah.
But there's so many other layers and nuanced ways to create revenue based on creating content, based on creating music or whatever artistic endeavor that you're going towards. And I'm thinking, we talked a little bit earlier offline before we got started about the coming sort of internet of value that's going to be built on blockchain, which I think we might be able to go back a little bit, turn the clock back when you did have where the only access was physical CDs, like you could control and have a limited source of material instead of easily replicated sources. So blockchain will helpfully enable this, and maybe shift the tides or shift the way the value gets transferred around. But that's the challenge, and the challenge of keeping your mind open to it, open to the change, open to taking this on. So I guess that's my next question is, you talked about keeping your mind open, but is there anything in particular that you do to challenge yourself all the time, or do you meditate? How do you keep your mind open? Obviously, it's easy to say to keep your mind open, but that's not easy for everyone to do.
Yeah, well, I do try. Well, I'm busy. I work with an Australian artist called Deni Hines, so we write together. So that keeps me open. We've just finished her new album, our latest album, and I do try to make time. The club takes up a lot of my time now, whereas before, 7 days a week. And when I do take time off, I take it to go out and play a couple of nights at other venues with my band. So I have to kind of plan that. So I have less and less time, but I still sit down at the computer and I put on YouTube, or I'll listen to a song and I'll try to be a better keyboard player. Mm-hmm. I'll try, to learn something new. I'll listen to other artists and think, wow, that's really cool. And I make a conscious effort every week. And I also have a couple of new tunes, electronica, and, kind of synthy tunes I'm putting together. And I'm always looking at new techie stuff, something that will inspire me to write a tune with, or to use, and collaborations are really important. To collaborate with somebody, have somebody over to play on one of my tracks, or play on somebody else's track. you know, I've worked with a few artists in Australia and the States. They'll send me their tracks and I'll just play on them and send them back the files. I mean, that's how cool and easy it is to do these days. You can be anywhere in the world and say, hey, will you, you know, you want to play on my track, and they record it in another country and send it back, or vice versa. But I write a lot of meditation music and chill out albums, but I don't actually do any meditation.
Oh, really? Okay. But I'm just curious, man, because you got a great mindset, and that's what I guess maybe why I'm drawn to you, because I like people that are continually challenging themselves, that are trying to figure out how to keep reinventing themselves as things are moving fast, and you know, and I continue to look to reinvent myself, you know, and I think collaborations is a great suggestion or a great idea, or you know, kind of technique to kind of get yourself out there and connected to other people that think differently or would approach a problem differently from you. I
think the days of having a job and having a skill, like when I was an electrician, people are afraid, and fear is a terrible thing. People are afraid to let that go because they might not get another job, or they're afraid if they get a job and it doesn't work out, they can't go back to their old job. It's like moving an apartment. When you know you should move, it's liberating. But they stay in the same place.
Once you do, it's completely
because
liberating.
They know the shop around the corner.
But before you do, you have that fear factor of what's on the other side. Right?
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes you have to let that go.
Yeah.
And I've done that a few times, and it's always it gets easier to do that because I've been challenged before, and I've always seemed to have made it through.
Right.
Getting a little bit older, that gets a little bit daunting because you don't want to move again. Countries, that is.
Right.
Apartments, yes, you can move and you can kind of do
Not
cool things,
deal,
move to a new area, experience new things. But moving country, you know, to start again and establish yourself, that's harder.
Yeah.
But as I've kind of grown through the countries I've been through, and from here, it might be a little bit easier because I've been through it before. And if you have some credibility with artists or albums you've played on, when you do arrive in another country, you're kind of arriving with a little bit of
you've got more
credibility
equity.
And say, hey, you know, they'll maybe take this guy seriously because he's done a lot.
Right. The transition might be a little easier than when you're younger.
Again, it all works hand in hand. You know, if you do nothing, nothing comes to you.
Right.
You know, if you're going forward, eventually somebody or something will meet you halfway and get you to the next point.
Right.
You know, and that journey it's always evolving, and it's always a challenge, you know, so that there's no way around that, but it can be a really enjoyable one.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's even along with the growing pains. That's what I found out. In terms of me just, you know, diving in and trying to travel more and starting the podcast and trying to do some of these different things.
Well,
so
I remember when you said you were starting the podcast, I was like, that's really cool, you know?
Yeah, it was something I couldn't have predicted or wouldn't have predicted.
Yeah.
And that actually kind of leads me into my last question for you is, can you share with us a reinvention revelation? That's what I call it. Something that you learned through these reinventions, or spending time in different countries, or forcing yourself to learn new skills that you wouldn't have known or predicted about yourself, or about something you learned about business, or something that you would never have imagined now sitting from looking back, you know, where you are now.
Yeah. When I was unemployed in Australia as a professional musician.
Okay.
I went and took on a business course to learn how to do business. And you kind of had to do these things anyway, otherwise, you know, you didn't get your money.
Right.
And I thought, well, I might as well, you know, if I'm going to do something, I want to do something that I might be able to put to use. And I think that was really valuable. And the first thing I learned in business school was how to juggle. And I had never juggled in my life.
How to juggle?
Yeah, with tennis balls.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
That was your first day of class?
That was my first day of class of business school.
Oh, really?
And there was a big box brought in by the lecturer.
Okay.
And he sat down and he goes, all right, you knew there was about probably 10 or 15 of us in this class.
Yeah.
And he said, you guys grab these ones and you guys grab the orange ones. And I'm like, okay. He goes, okay. Right. We're going to learn how to juggle today. And I was like, I'm definitely in the wrong class. What the you know, what's going on here?
Money for this
guy's a crackpot. And he's either in the wrong room or we're all in the wrong room. And it was a very simple lesson. And when we left there, we were all juggling 2 or 3 balls and doing it okay. And we had a bit of a laugh. So it done several things. It bonded us as people who had no idea what we're doing, We were all starting out in life from zero, with no skills in business. And now we all knew each other, laughed at each other, broke down. We were all the same. Nobody was better than anybody else. Nobody had more skills than them. Nobody else was a better keyboard player than me, or I wasn't. Right. Nobody was a better, something else than architect or just whatever people were. And we all walked out of there with a new skill, and that was juggling.
Interesting.
And when you can juggle, literally,
right,
when you've got a new skill, you feel like you're on top of the world. And I've never forgot that in everything I've done.
Interesting. I love
going
that.
forward.
I love that.
Yeah. And so I stuck it through. I learned how to put a business proposal together, what a business plan was, a small business course. And so I understood things about what liabilities were. I understood things you needed to have in a business plan if you wanted to open a shop. And my thesis I did on opening a rehearsal studio with a recording studio, rehearsal studios with a cafe. And that was my first business proposal, and that was for my course.
Ah, I see. Okay.
So, and then on top of that, years later, I wanted to know more about the music industry. What are the roles of the people that are in record labels? When you get it, like we spoke about this before, friends of mine say, "Hey, we got a publishing deal." I said, "Great, what sort of publishing deal do we get?" "Oh, well, we got a publishing deal, man, with such and such a record." I'm like, "Yeah, but what sort of publishing deal is it? What does it mean?
Exactly?"
What did you get? You got 5 pencils and a notepad, but what do you get? What exactly is it? So anyway, yeah. So that was one thing that I learned, and it's something I remember, and I've kept that with me through my life. The other thing is experiencing people in other countries. Try to travel, open your eyes. Be somewhere, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to get on a plane, save your money, and sell everything and go.
Right.
You'll never be disappointed. Even if it's not a great experience, you take something good from that. I've learned something from that. I'll never do that again.
Right.
And you move forward. And I think today we're in a very not strange, but different place now with how you sell things, how you buy things.
The world is really morphing into something different, I think, than we've experienced kind of in the 20th century, where it was a little more defined and things move slower. Yeah. And that's why, really, that's the emphasis of the podcast is to kind of wake people up a little bit, try to get their mind open a little bit to.
Yeah. But don't sit there and say, "Oh, I don't understand this.
Right.
I'm too old for this," or "I'll never understand this. I'm not a musician. I can't."
Yeah.
You can
always learn to juggle, right?
You can always learn to juggle. You can learn to juggle. If you can learn to juggle, you can pretty much do anything.
I love that metaphor. I think that's a takeaway for me that I'll probably remember that, because that's a great way to remember that. Hey, there's always a way to learn something new.
Yeah.
And learning something new with other people can help you bond and get you out of your comfort zone.
Get involved. Don't sit around.
Cool.
Life will pass you by unless you're a part of it, And
Absolutely.
It's short. Get on it. And if you don't know, ask. Open your mouth and ask somebody, do they know somebody?
Right.
I'm interested in this. How do I put it together,
Very good.
And, yeah.
Well, Keith, I'm going to ask you to let everybody know that, first of all, thanks for being on.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I could talk to you all day long, man.
Yes,
there's so many other things we can talk about, because music bonds us and all the and travel and everything. But if people are interested in finding out more about your music production stuff, or just connecting with you personally, or maybe checking out Checkin' 99, whatever you want to hand out, where would you send people to go, or what do you want to tell them?
It's always good when people hear your music. I store a lot of my music, most of it, albums and singles and stuff I put out, under the name Keith the Human on bandcamp.com.
Okay.
And of course it's credited to Keith Nolan, all the songs. But you can go to Spotify, you can go to CD Baby and search Keith Nolan. I've got a lot of music there. But Bandcamp, I like that place because I can quietly, under the name Keith the Human, just put all my albums and singles, stuff I personally like.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I hang it there.
Do you have a link for that? I'll make sure I put it in the show notes.
Yeah, just Keith, just bandcamp.com/Keith the Human.
Keith the Human. Okay.
And again, if anybody's coming through Bangkok, come and visit me. I'm at Check-In 99, or search Keith Nolan in Bangkok.
Right.
I'm sure I'll come up somewhere.
Right. And any of my jazz friends out there, they got to come to the Jazz Jam, right, on Sundays.
Sunday afternoons.
Every Sunday usually, right?
It's been running for over a decade, and it's fantastic.
Okay.
From 3 to 6:45 at the moment.
Very
so
cool.
at Check-In 99,
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Keith,
for
thanks
having
so
me on
much,
the show.
man.
You're
All
very
right.
welcome.
Thank you for listening to Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com. See you next time, and remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of. Hey revolutionaries, if you enjoyed today's episode and today's guest, let them know by commenting on their Facebook page, finding their Twitter handle or Instagram feed, and letting them know you heard them on Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, and tell them what you got out of the episode, what you really liked, or how they inspired you. I know they would get a kick out of it and will help others find the same value that you found.